The Memphis Grizzlies played on Christmas Day for the very first time in franchise history. There was a buzz in and around Memphis and the fans of the team all day long. Ja Morant's signature shoe dropped. Wonderful vibes. The vibes were immaculate as always, Damichael. And then the game started, and the Memphis Grizzlies were embarrassed on national television by the Golden State Warriors and three people wearing different uniforms. We'll talk about that and more next here on Locked On Grizzlies. Let's lock in.
You are Locked On Grizzlies, your daily Memphis Grizzlies podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to another episode of Locked On Grizzlies, your team each and every day here on the Locked On Podcast Network. We are free and available wherever you get your podcasts. I am one of your hosts, Joe Mullinax, mentally ill. I believe I said on the last episode that I was not going to be on this episode, but yet here I am because I wanted to see Damichael so badly because I knew he was going to be in a suit and he just looks so nice. My wonderful co-host, Damichael Cole, there in San Francisco still, fresh off the Grizzlies' loss to the Warriors. How are you doing, sir?
You know what? I'm great. For one, I'm honored that you wanted to hang in there and do this episode with me. You know that's great. I love it better when we both do this thing. You know, it's cool. It's cool to do the episode overall after a fun night. I call it a fun night. Might not be fun to a lot of our viewers, but it was a fun night for me at least. But still, it's so much better when we can tag team this thing, Joe. But anyways, I'm doing great. Early flight in the morning, so got to get ready for that bad boy. But all things considered, fun road trip overall. One where I can't wait to catch up on my sleep. But you know what? It was worth it. You know, just witnessing history. First Grizzlies Christmas game ever.
Major deal, and I do think that can't be lost on us, even in the outcome that nobody really wanted, let's be honest, at least if you're a Grizzlies fan. If you're listening to this as a Warriors fan, you're pretty excited, and be nice in the comments, Warriors fans. We're free and available wherever you get your podcasts. You can subscribe, like, rate, review, all those things, whether it be via podcast or on our YouTube page. It's all appreciated. Thank you so much for making us a part of your Memphis Grizzlies experience. Damichael, let's start with some good news, right? Because this podcast could take a negative turn into Debbie Downerville at any point. And I don't want to be that Danny downside just yet. So let's start with a guy who, aside from the game, and even in the game, he played really well. Unfortunately, basketball is a team sport, but he did really well in the game. Ja Morant had a hell of a Christmas day. The Ja ones were debuted, both in terms of him playing and in terms of him having an ad on his Twitter page, or not necessarily an ad, just a video with he and his daughter unveiling the shoe. I am not a huge sneakerhead. I know you are, Damichael, and I'll let you talk maybe to the aesthetics a little bit more. But I thought they looked nice. I thought they looked functional. I will say I'll be buying a pair if it comes in the colors of my school that I work at. I'll be repping those very proudly as my sneakers for the coming year. I think that what that needs to continue to be a focus of for Grizzlies fans is the fact that a Memphis Grizzlies player has a signature shoe. Like, we can't lose sight of that. So even if it was ugly, which I don't think it is, just the fact that on the biggest stage that the NBA has to offer, whether it be the shoe, the dunk that almost completely destroyed one of the Warriors players and would have been the greatest dunk in the history of dunks. Ja has a lot of those at this stage of his career, but he had a really good day, from a strong performance in the game itself to the shoe being unveiled and getting positive reviews. A really good day for Ja Morant.
Yeah, I mean, in just talking to him after the game, even after the loss, he wasn't happy with the loss, but just this was special to him. It was hard, he said, just to hold this in. He's been holding this in a while. So this is literally, it's been a while. I think I've said in the past that when you talk about the production of your own signature shoe, this is a process that takes years. Ja talked about this conversation been going on for 2 years, I believe, or so. And then you talk about just the production and the marketing. We've seen this logo, right? The new Ja logo with Nike. You've seen him unveil the sweats in the pregame. He wore them. Ja Morant wore it as well. Something like that. All of that takes months and years to plan out. And, it's here now, so it's the Ja 1, the official unveiling. The colorway that we saw unveil, that does not mean, that's going to be the first official colorway that's going to be out. That was just the first official colorway that we got to lay our eyes on. And then as we saw when the game started, he wore a different colorway. He wore a purple one during the game. And then, of course, so it's from some people that I've talked to, I've learned that, April 2023 is the official release date, when they're going to be in stores and they're going to be public for everyone and they're going to be sold, at higher volumes. But until then, I think it's April 1st of 2023. That's the exact day that some people in Nike have told me as well. But before that, they're actually going to have some special releases, Joe. So if you or someone else, want to get your hands on those special releases in the earlier months, they will have some possibly potentially available in smaller dosages then. But with all that being said, I mean, it's great for Ja Morant. When you talk about the aesthetics of the shoe, it's another low top model. We've seen the low top model is the most popular and the most, it's just what a lot of players like to wear these days. You look at the LeBron 20 that is, just came out recently, and a lot of people are saying this is LeBron's best shoe, and it's his 20th. And they're saying it's his best one. So it's because it's a low top. It's similar to the Kobe's. And if you look at what Ja Morant has historically worn, he's worn Kobe 6s, which are low top sneakers as well. KD 4s. Kevin Durant actually, said it's going to be, tough not seeing Ja wear the KD 4s anymore. But he also gave him a congratulations. So all things considered, it kind of has some similar aesthetic feels, in terms of the way it looks to those shoes, but he does have his own touch on it. And it'll be interesting to see, just over the course of his shoe, when the Ja 2 comes out and all of that, what he'll do for an encore, how different would that shoe look, and just, how he'll continue to grow from here. But it's big. It's big for Ja Morant. It's big for Nike. It's big for Memphis as a whole. I mean, we had Penny Hardaway, and I say we because I'm born and raised in Memphis. We had Penny Hardaway, and I tell people all the time, Joe, Penny Hardaway is the Michael Jordan of Memphis, and I'll stand on that comment because I was one of those kids who seen what he meant, to Memphis and all the great things he did in that city and how everyone goes to bat for him even before this head coaching job. He's like the Jordan of Memphis, but what Ja is doing right now is just so special, and it's great to witness. The city is 100% behind him. The shoe's great, but he wore them. He had a great performance himself. But then again, the Grizzlies, it felt like it kind of rained on the parade of the great night, Joe.
It most certainly did. And again, Ja Morant, we're not going to read the numbers. That gets super boring. But, he had another 30-plus kind of night in terms of his overall scoring. He was strong in terms of assists and rebounds. He had another all-NBA top 10 player in the National Basketball Association kind of showing on a day, Damichael, where there were lots of those kinds of showings, right? In terms of Jason Tatum dominating the Milwaukee Bucks, Joel Embiid and James Harden, even LeBron James, talking about LeBron in this segment, had a really strong game. Nikola Jokic played really well in the nightcap. So there were lots of good performances in this one. Ja Morant more than held up his end of the bargain in terms of being a quality Christmas Day attraction for the National Basketball Association. The rest of the Grizzlies, not so much. And that game did indeed kind of rain on the parade for Memphis. But again, there were three individuals that were also sharing the floor with the Grizzlies and the Warriors that drew a lot of the ire on both sides of the bleachers, so to speak, in terms of fans and players alike. We'll talk about that more next here on Locked On Grizzlies. But first, this episode of Locked On Grizzlies is brought to you by Bet Online. Make sure that you are making Bet Online your number one source for sports betting info, stats, news, and analysis. BetOnline.net has the latest odds and trends for every professional and amateur league out there, from pro football to college bowl season to basketball They've got it all over at betonline.net. If you love sports podcasts, you can even find those as well. They're the fastest and easiest way to get betting info. Head to the website today or use your mobile device to learn more. Bet online, where the game starts. Officials, Dillon Brooks, Klay Thompson. We'll talk about all those topics next here on Locked On Grizzlies. Don't go anywhere. Welcome back to Locked On Grizzlies. I am one of your hosts, Joe Mullinax, joined by my co-host, Damichael Cole of the Commercial Appeal, looking so dapper, fresh off the Grizzlies' loss to the Warriors there out in San Francisco. One of the wonderful things about technology, I'm on the East Coast, he's on the West, and we're able to record this wonderful show for you. And I want to talk about not necessarily officials, because that's something that you can't really control. Right, Damichael?
Yeah, right.
I know we'll talk about it. I know, but I want to start with something that the Grizzlies can, in theory, control, and that's Dillon Brooks. Now, maybe that's a fool's errand, and you can't really control the overall wearing Dillon Brooks. But I do think that what he said after the game, and I'll read your tweet here. I have it pulled up in front of me. Damichael asked Dillon Brooks about his reaction to Klay Thompson. Klay Thompson pretty emphatically taunted Dillon Brooks during the game, which
pretty emphatically,
yeah, that's probably the nicest way to put it. Go find that on the internet somewhere.
You don't have
if you
to
haven't
find
seen it yet.
It'll find you. It'll find you.
So, and again, there's been a lot of trash talk, and you and I both on social media, we're on the same page with this. When you're going to talk that trash, and if you get beat, you kind of eat it. So here's what Dillon said: the refs let it happen. They were doing it all game, and then they want to catch the bad guy. That's whack to me. Effed up calls. I'll let you fill in the rest of the letters. This is a family show. Putting the wrong guys on the free throw line. It was a circus. That's pretty emphatic, Damichael, and you've been around NBA players for a while now.
Yeah.
That's probably going to result in a letter and a fine from the league office.
Oh, there's no probably about it. That's he's going to get a nice paycheck, and I just want to point out, just what he's talking about there, because when I asked him the question, the way that I phrased the question was particularly the Klay Thompson taunting play where he, Dillon Brooks is falling.
It was emphatic.
And Dillon Brooks's response was more, it wasn't a surprise to me that he responded that way at all, because Dillon Brooks is definitely one to speak his mind. It was the overview. And he actually took the big picture. You didn't hear, too many people. And that's the thing about the Grizzlies. We talk about how they like to talk, but when it comes to refereeing a lot, I can only remember, last season one time when Taylor Jenkins in the playoffs against Minnesota, where he called the referees out and got the fine. And it's not a common thing, around here that the Grizzlies do. So basically, Dillon Brooks, says what he said. I went up to Jaren afterward as well, because in a way, Dillon Brooks was sticking up for Jaren Jackson Jr. If you read the quote there, but in the quote, he mentioned, messing up the calls, and he said putting the wrong guys on the free throw line. I saw a lot of people in my mention. I'm sure you'll remember the play, Joe, where it appeared that Jackson was called late in third quarter for a foul on James Wiseman.
Ticky-tack call, but he did grab the jersey. But it was James Wiseman, and then it was Klay Thompson that actually took the free throws.
Klay Thompson took the free throws, and I don't have to spell it out to you. The free throw shooting difference between those two players. I mean, you're talking about one of the greatest shooters to ever play the game versus, a big man who's finding his way in the league. Granted, a talented one, but, different levels of free throw shooting here overall.
You'd rather Klay Thompson shoot those shots.
Yeah. Yeah. You, if you were a Warriors fan.
Me, I would too. Yeah, absolutely.
But the thing is, that play, and I asked Jaren, asked Jaren a similar question, and Jaren basically, took the road of, I don't want to get my pockets affected. And he didn't say that, but that's, when players take the high road, he basically said, look, I have a lot I want to say, but I'm not going to. So
is it worth tens of thousands of dollars?
But what stands out into what he said is, I have a lot I want to say. It's clear that they were not happy with the officiating in this game. And you know what? It's not an excuse. It's not an excuse at all, Joe, because the Warriors weren't happy with the officiating either.
It was
I was
bad
at
both
the game,
ways.
and the Warriors fans were chanting, "Ref, you suck," a lot of times throughout that game, and that's why me and you, Joe, that's why we talk about we don't get on here, not on Locked On Grizzlies. We don't get on Locked On Grizzlies and talk about how bad referees are, because at the end of the day, you cannot find me a basketball game where both fan bases said, "Boy, I tell you, the referees didn't miss a call today. Look at that. They didn't miss a call for you, or they didn't miss a call for us." You will never hear such a thing. So with all that being said, yeah, it's frustrating, I think, just because Dillon Brooks is a competitor. I think there is some validity to what he was saying. There were some missed calls, there were some messed up calls, but there's also some validity to, Taylor Jenkins, I think Ja, and a couple other guys, even Dillon, saying, they didn't have the same intensity that they're used to having in this game. And it kind of goes back to those road splits that we talk about, right? They had the one game against the Suns where they looked superhuman, but then this game basically just follows the path of the first two road games against Oklahoma City and the Denver Nuggets that we saw on this 4-game road trip.
Yeah, very, very similar. And in terms of officiating, the biggest thing, obviously fouls, and we'll talk about Jaren Jackson Jr. here in a moment. Obviously, fouls that are accrued matter. But the free throw disparity didn't exist. Memphis took 30 free throws in the game, and Golden State took 26. So that's a +4 differential. That's not really for Memphis something that you would point at and say, "Oh, the refs had it out for the Grizzlies." Now, a lot of those were off of Golden State technical fouls. I think that the Golden State Warriors had 6 or so technicals in this game, which is just fascinating.
The Warriors had 6. They were talking. And I mean, when I say they were talking, when the whistles were blown, you'd see Draymond run to the other side of the court, not in the direction of the Grizzlies, but just little stuff that the players on the opposing team see, and it'll get them riled up a little bit. Just smart, veteran, savvy stuff, right? The Warriors had 6 technicals. The Grizzlies had 1, which was a team technical for a delay of game. So yeah, it was a feisty game.
Well, you made a good point earlier about how Memphis gets a lot of, crap from opposing fan bases for talking so much. But you're exactly right that they don't do it during the games. They don't have those many. They'll get a technical every once in a while, but they do not at anywhere near the rate that the Golden State Warriors do. I do want to
Ja Morant and Dillon Brooks. Those two guys are top 5, top 10 in the NBA, but the rest of those guys, it's rare. Yeah,
correct. I do want to briefly mention Jaren Jackson Jr. We can talk more about him in the final segment as well, but I am fascinated by the concern of Grizzlies fans, and I wrote about this in my Substack for Monday, the newsletter that I do, Written in the Dark. Jaren Jackson Jr., even with his current struggles, obviously not including the Christmas game, but per Cleaning the Glass, 4.0%, 4.2% roughly in terms of foul percentage. That puts him in the middle of the pack among NBA bigs. Not great, but the way that he defends and the way that he was before 2 seasons ago,
that's much better.
He was at 6.4% Damichael, which would have had him in the 5th percentile, one of the very worst in the NBA. So in the last few games, it's reared its ugly head again, these issues. We talked about it on the last episode too, and it certainly was a problem against the Warriors. But for me, Damichael, I'm not concerned about it long term because, again, over a wider 2,400-minute span going back to last season, he's gotten better in this area. He just needs to kind of refocus and reset a little bit. So I'm not as concerned about the foul issues with Jaren as maybe others are.
Me either. And I was on Twitter, during the game. I seen some of the things.
A lot of negative energy.
And, one thing that happens when you play on national TV is you see people who basically, how do I say this? They basically, go with narratives. Their opinion of a team is formed around narratives. There are a lot of people who say, "Oh, Ja Morant can't shoot. Since he had a bad shooting night, he can't shoot 3-pointers." They haven't been seeing the logo 3-pointers that we've been seeing in games that are just, regionally televised.
Right.
And then, so the Jaren Jackson Jr., that brings me back to that. I see people, he was actually trending on Twitter for the fouls, and there were people making jokes about, Jaren Jackson Jr., when he picks up 2 fouls, he's trying to pick up another one, and give me just throwing out jokes about Jaren Jackson Jr.'s fouls. And the whole time I'm like, did they not know entering this game, he's averaging 2.9 fouls per game, which is well below any other season of his career. Or if you go back to last season, he was averaging 3.5 fouls per game, which was the lowest in his career to that.
With a lot more minutes played.
Yeah, with more minutes played. So the last 2 seasons, he's decreased his fouls. And people are still going on this narrative. Now, even last season, 3.5 fouls per game, I think he said that's still a relatively high number compared to the rest of the league. Okay, I'll give you that. But this season, I feel like he's kind of earned it so far to like, okay, let's take that away from him. Grant, if you want Jaren Jackson Jr. to play defense, how Jaren Jackson Jr. plays defense, he's gonna get his fouls. There are some, like, there was a charge in this game where it was like, he probably shouldn't have got that one. You mentioned the ticky-tack one with James Wiseman. There are a couple of those, and there are the boneheaded ones. But for the most part, Jaren Jackson Jr., he's challenging everything at the rim. We don't consider that enough. He's gotten dunked on a few times in his career because he's not afraid. A lot of times, a lot of guys in the NBA, they'll be pretty, Joe. They'll see someone coming at the rim. Oh, let me get out the way. Oh, I don't want to be on that. And they'll just get out of the way. Jaren Jackson Jr. challenges us every time. And with that, there are going to be a couple more fouls. I've seen people saying he should be smarter about it and all that. I do agree. There are ways to be smarter about it. But at the end of the day, it's not a concern over here. And it doesn't sound like you're concerned either.
No, I'm not concerned about the Grizzlies in general. They are 7-3 in their last 10 games. So while 3 of those losses were recent, and on this most recent road trip, 1-3, I think they end the 4-game swing on. You got to remember they won 6 or so games in a row before that. So I'm not concerned. It's a larger body of work, and we'll talk more about that here in our final segment in a moment. But first, I want to make sure I'm shouting out all of you and everyone that is listening to Locked On Grizzlies and watching us, making us your first listen every day. Make sure you check out Locked On Sports Today, the biggest stories around the sports world in 20 minutes or less, plus instant reactions, game recaps, and Locked On's Take of the Day. Locked On Sports Today is available on YouTube and wherever you get your podcasts. This episode of Locked On Grizzlies is brought to you by the NHTSA. You're hanging out with some friends and putting back a few drinks. A few becomes a few too many. This time of year, the holidays, everybody maybe has a beverage once in a while. As the evening comes to an end and people start to head out, you think of calling for a ride, but you live nearby. You can make it home okay. It'll be fine. What are the odds that you're going to get pulled over anyway? And even if you do, what's the worst that could happen? Your insurance goes up, or you lose your license, you lose your job, you total your car, you kill someone. Everybody knows about the risks of drinking and driving. The results are tragic and often deadly. However, that still doesn't stop everyone from getting behind the wheel while under the influence. That's why police officers are out there right now looking for impaired drivers on our roads to save lives. So if you think you're okay with driving after a few drinks, think again. Play it safe and plan ahead to get a ride. It only takes one mistake to change your life or someone else's forever. Drive sober or get pulled over. We'll wrap up our conversation of Grizzlies Warriors next here on Locked On Grizzlies. Don't go anywhere. Welcome back to Locked On Grizzlies. Damichael Cole of the Commercial Appeal there, getting ready to sign off in San Francisco. I'm sure he's excited for a few shut-eye winks, so to speak, before he gets on a plane to head back home to Memphis. And Damichael, I'm curious. Obviously, there's lots of other storylines coming out of this game, narratives, as we mentioned earlier in the show. Desmond Bane looking like he was a bit out of condition, whether it's on the floor, running, shooting the ball. I do think that we kind of overlooked, or at least I overlooked, the conditioning aspect of having a toe injury, not being able to run as much potentially. You also, obviously, if you play basketball, and obviously they play at a much higher level than you or I, but you and I have played enough that your toes and your feet are kind of important for your shot.
It's important. And the thing about it, Joe, is, he even, said, I sat down with him after the game in the locker room. It's just us. We're just talking for a while, just about, the process.
Sure.
And he was saying, he kind of, he didn't say he expected this, but he said he knew it would be a challenge.
And he has said that in the past when he has come back from injury.
Think to how Desmond Bane started the season. You remember when he first started this season? There was that Knicks game. He didn't have a pretty game. He shot bad. If I remember correctly off the top of my head, in that season over, I believe he was 3 of 12 on 3-pointers. But it was somewhere around there, guarantee you. But And then there was the next game and a couple games. It wasn't until the fifth game of the season where Desmond Bane just went crazy. That Nets game stood out. That was one of his first big games of the season when he and Ja both scored 38 points and, made history in that game. And then he took off from that point. Desmond Bane is a rhythm player. We were sitting down talking. He was like, man, we were talking about the home and road splits and laughing about it. He said, man, I'm sure I got a bunch of funny splits. He says, I feel like I play better, in the set way better in the second half than I do in the first half. I didn't look it up yet, but that's him saying that. I feel like just from a field perspective, that's a player who, knows like I'm a rhythm guy.
Right.
He's not just gonna like when you shoot as much as he do. It's not like Ja Morant. Even Ja Morant, if you remember when he came back last season around this time exactly, after he missed about a month or three or so weeks when he had the knee injury, and he came back in that game and he lost when they lost to OKC and he was rusty and stuff like that. It happens to the best players. And you mentioned with Desmond Bane. The thing about Desmond Bane is no one on this Grizzlies team runs more than Desmond Bane when they're on offense.
Mm-hmm.
Think about all the cutting. He and Steven Adams, the work that they do. When he relocates, when Ja Morant has the ball and stuff like that, it's a big part of his game. And he's adjusting, and, he still say he's finding it, but there's reason to be confident in him. And I know a couple other guys you want to mention as well were John Conchar and Zaire Williams. I didn't get to catch John Conchar after the game, but Joe, I think you'll probably be a little more relieved to hear Zaire Williams basically say, he told me straight up, he's like, look, I feel good. I said, what about in terms of last season, the end of last season? He's like, I feel the exact same way. It's just a matter of a couple more shots falling. And hearing Zaire Williams say this, I will say this. Zaire Williams, I feel like is an honest guy. When I first talked to him his first game back, he said it. He said, hey, my body's not exactly there yet. It feels like when I get put in certain positions, my body locks up, like his mind, is catching up with his body, all that. He's an honest guy. So him saying, look, I feel great. It's only a matter of time. It made me believe Zaire Williams, his slump, is probably going to end really soon. But John Conchar, your guy, Joe, it's probably a little bit of a different case right now. 1 point combined in his last 3 games in over 54 minutes.
It's unacceptable. And in this particular game, I think he played 20 minutes and he only grabbed 2 rebounds. So that's the other area that people point at that he's so elite at, which in fairness to him, he is. He is one of the better rebounding wings in the NBA. But if he's not going to score and if he's not going to rebound, if he's not going to take 3-point shots, he can't play. I think you and I are on the same page with this, and maybe we're not. And it'd be okay if we're not. You play your best players. And you play your guys that have the best capacity physically to compete at a high level. John Conchar is a wonderful stopgap. I'm going to compare him using Football Reference. He's a backup quarterback is what he is. He's a career backup quarterback. You need him to go in there for a few starts, keep you afloat. He's very good at that, okay? He should not be in a 10-man or 9-man rotation for a team that is trying to compete for an NBA championship. Look at the Boston Celtics and their 8-man rotation. John Conchar is not sniffing that. He's not coming close to what the Boston Celtics can. And the Celtics, one of the main storylines or narratives coming out of Christmas for me is they're better than everybody. Like everybody's chasing the Boston Celtics, in my opinion, from watching the games. They were phenomenal against the Bucks. And I know Chris Middleton didn't play. I don't think it would have mattered. I think Boston,
that's my rebuttal.
Yeah, Boston would have had the same result, in my opinion. That's how good they
I'm
look.
not having it, Joe.
That's okay. We can talk more about Eastern Conference contenders on another show. But I'm a believer in the Celtics. So when you have Malcolm Brogdon, when you have Grant Williams, when you have Robert Williams coming off of your bench, and those are your 3 best dudes, cool. Yeah. For Memphis, I think with Tyus Jones and Brandon Clark, similar conversation, right? I think you can make an argument. I don't know that I'd agree with the argument, but I think you can have the debate. The question is who becomes the 8th guy? Who's the 8th dude? And if I have to look at our roster currently as people that cover the Memphis Grizzlies, I'm going to say that of everybody that's available, and Danny Green, maybe if he does come back around the All-Star break, as was reported over the weekend, if that's possible, maybe he's in that conversation, maybe. But if I'm choosing between Santi Aldama, Zaire Williams, and John Conchar, the highest ceiling in terms of positional malleability, in terms of skill, is Zaire Williams, at least for me. And again, your ninth guy can be Aldama. I think Conchar is at best your 10th. And I would probably even give David Roddy or Laravia, guys that you invested first round picks in, I would probably give those minutes to Conchar at this point. Conchar is the backup quarterback. He comes in when you need him to. That would be my stance.
Yeah, and I'm not too far off from you right there. I actually asked Taylor Jenkins, about this, and specifically after the game, I asked him why isn't David Roddy playing? And I asked him, could we see David Roddy get more minutes going forward? And his answer, paraphrasing, was it's something they'll evaluate. And they're gonna figure that out. I think usually when I ask Taylor Jenkins those type of questions, I think he legitimately does evaluate those things. And I think there's a chance we could see David Roddy crack into that rotation again. 1 point in 54 minutes is hard to do for any NBA player. I've been an advocate for John Conchar in a lot of ways. And I will say this though, I remember I put on Twitter that that'll be Danny Green's spot once he's healthy. And most people agree, but someone was like, I'm out of my mind. I would really love to see what that one person has to say now after the past 3 games, seeing John Conchar score. But I still think, like you said, backup quarterback is a great thing. He is a good stopgap. He kept the ball rolling while he was in the starting lineup. Remember, the Grizzlies won, on that winning streak while John Conchar was in the starting lineup. He's not a guy who ever does too much, which is great, right? He doesn't ever come into the game and try to steal the shine of the other guys or anything. He plays his role. He plays the same exact role. He relocates, he shoots, he rebounds, he defends. That's what you're going to get out of John Conchar. And he's solid, at that role. But at the same time, you got some talented first-round picks, in particular, David Roddy. I think Zaire Williams, we've seen him play the shooting guard position in preseason a little bit. David Roddy has played the 3 a lot. He shot the three-pointer better. And he's aggressive when he goes to the basket. You saw the poster dunk he had in the Suns game. He's not going to score 1 point in 54 minutes. I can guarantee that.
Yeah, it's a challenging thing to watch him. The carefully curated shots. When they aren't there just isn't much else there from him offensively. There's got to be more, and I'm sure we'll talk more about that on our next episode of Locked On Grizzlies. Thanks for making this episode of Locked On Grizzlies your first listen today. Now go make Locked On Sports Today your second listen. Peter Bukowski brings you the biggest stories from around the sports world in 20 minutes. Get the analysis and opinions before anyone else with our local and national experts and insiders. Locked On Sports Today podcast is available on YouTube and wherever you get your podcasts. Damichael, I don't know if you know this about me, but I don't want to say famous. I don't think that's the right word. But I am known among Grizzlies fans and Twitter folk, back to my days running Grizzly Bear Blues, for call me at Christmas, right?
It's
call
Christmas
me at Christmas
time.
We are recording the morning after Christmas. And I think that for our next episode, I'll be traveling, but I'll still have access to all my stuff. So we can record our next episode and take a look at this Grizzlies team at Christmas, because I think we can start making some definitive statements. I kind of made one of my definitive statements a moment ago, but it'll give us some time to come up with some others, and that can kind of take us through our next episode, because we've already previewed the Phoenix Suns. They're the next opponent for Memphis. That's a recent game for us. I think it makes sense to look at this Grizzlies team and say, who are they? And is there something more that needs to be done? I think it's time to make an evaluation.
It's time to make an evaluation, right? We finally get
like Taylor Jenkins.
We see the full lineup at full health. We've seen the bench guys. We've seen everyone adjust. Tyus Jones is playing a lot less minutes now. And we have a lot to go off of. You said call you at Christmas. Joe, we got the number now. Now it's time to make the call.
I think we'll make the call on the next episode of Locked On Grizzlies. Thank you guys so much for listening to the show. Rate, review, subscribe, like, comment on YouTube, however you get podcasts, and of course our YouTube channel. Make sure you continue to make Locked On Grizzlies part of your Memphis Grizzlies experience. We're proud members of the Locked On podcast, your team every day. Until next time, Damichael, safe travels, buddy. Get some rest. And I'll be talking to you soon. And I'll be talking to you soon as well, dear viewer, dear listener, here on Locked On Grizzlies. Stay locked in. Have a good one.